Festive Furlough at the Wonderland workshop. Santa folded his enormous hairy arms across his chest and gave a deep, resigned sigh. He stood on the wooden platform overlooking the workshop and indulged himself for a few moments in the memory of previous Christmases at the North Pole. The workshop would be a thriving, bustling hive of activity as the elves frantically manufactured and wrapped, labelled and filed, sorted and sealed up all of the presents for the children of the world. There would be sawdust and Christmas song in the air. There would be curls of ribbon and slivers of patterned paper on the deck. Occasionally, a door to the night outside would be briefly opened as the elves transferred sacks of prepared presents across to the stable. The cold wind and snowflakes that would whip through the workshop were a welcome cool relief to the hard-working and determined little folk. But the workshop that Santa now looked over was still and silent but for the wind howling outside. He whistled the first few notes of Dashing Through the Snow, but it sounded sad to him now for the first time. So lost in thought was Santa that he did not hear his wife come up behind him and was a little startled when she put her arm around his waist. "Here, I thought you might need this," she said, handing him a huge mug of steaming hot chocolate topped with foamy cream. "Thank you," said Santa. "You know, I really couldn't have done things any differently this year. I know that the elves really wanted to help. I had to practically order them not to come in. He continued, but his voice trailed off. "You did your absolute best, Nick. No one can blame you for that. But you really need to read your letters. It will be difficult this year, I know, but putting it off will only make you feel worse." "You're right," replied Santa with a sudden, serious, determined tone. "I'm going to do it right now." He took a big swig from his mug, licked the cream off his bushy white moustache, handed the mug back to Mrs. Claus, and marched off towards the records room. Santa's arms were no longer folded across his chest, they were swinging by his sides purposefully. There was a moment of hesitation when Santa reached the door of the records room. He half turned the shiny brass knob on the huge oak door before taking a deep breath and entering. Inside, the room was filled with stacks of unopened letters. They teetered and tottered back and forth, not unlike the foamy cream on his hot chocolate. In the centre of the room, nested inside all of the mail, was Santa's reading desk. His two leather-bound ledger books sat on the shiny, polished wood surface of the desk. In wonderful, flowing, elvish letters on the front of each book were two words, respectively: naughty and nice. Santa sank into his chair and pulled the desk close to him. He lifted his letter opener and then adjusted the lamp that hung over the chair beside his shoulder until the light was just right. "Next," he muttered, and a letter from the top of one of the swaying piles flew down and landed very precisely on his desk. He opened it with his letter opener and began to read. Santa did not move from his chair again until he had read every letter in the room and updated his ledgers. He read letters in English and in French, in Japanese and Norwegian, in Russian, Romanian and Italian. But no matter the language, Santa read the same thing. Stories of the children of the world being especially brave, being especially patient, and being especially kind during the hardest of years. By the time he was finished, Santa had almost filled his nice book and barely touched the naughty one. He had never seen it like this. It was both astonishing and delightful to him. Santa stood up from his desk, stretched out his aching back and rolled up his sleeves. "Time to get to work," he said out loud to himself. Mrs. Claus visited the workshop regularly over the next few weeks as Santa worked away tirelessly. Sometimes she would see him turning wood in the lathe as he shaped a part for some toy car or rocket ship. Sometimes he would be bent over a table strewn with tiny metal parts with a soldering tool held like a pencil, making electronics for a games console. Sometimes he would be on a whirring sewing machine, intently stitching together panels of fabric to make shirts or sportswear. Sometimes he would simply be lying on a pile of boxes, snoring and exhausted, his black leather boots kicked off nearby. Regardless of what he was doing, she would simply leave his meal or his hot chocolate on the railing on the platform, taking the dishes away when she visited with the next set, even when Santa's food hadn't been touched. The weather on the night of Christmas Eve was unusually calm and clear in the North Pole. The sky was crystal and moonlight lit up the snow dunes in a faint blue glow. Santa was in the stables earlier than he usually would be, feeding the reindeer and individually preparing their reins with great care and love. Mrs. Claus had come out to see him off, and she held her jacket tightly closed around her. She blew frosty breath in the shapes of stars and baubles as Santa performed his pre-flight checks. "I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it all," Santa said finally, indicating to the bulging sacks of presents piled high on the back of his sleigh. "All those children in my nice book, they deserve their presents even more this year," he said. "They believe in me." "Yes, they do," replied Mrs. Claus softly. "But Nick, but Santa," she said with a firm emphasis, "this year you must believe in them." When her husband hugged her, Mrs. Claus saw that his eyes were moist and glistening. She dabbed them at the corners with the top of her mitten. She looked again and saw that he once again had that magical glint beneath the tears. His tears had been of joy and pride and gratitude. She had reminded him, yes, even Santa needs reminded, of the true spirit of Christmas. Santa turned and sprang up onto his sleigh with the athleticism of a man half his age and half his weight. Mrs. Claus watched as Santa guided the reindeer out of the stable doors and onto the runway he had dug out in the snow earlier that evening. After the gentlest shake of the reins, the reindeer began to trot down the shovel-cleared path. Their hooves left the ground, and the whole contraption was airborne. An instant later, they were gone. At close to the speed of light, they had vanished into the stars, leaving behind only swirls of snowflakes and the echo of the sound of bells.